but I need to get back.
Well, hey, Donna, that you won't bake me any of those delicious cookies. I need the rest
I'm
of
going to get you the recipe. I thought about you.
Okay.
Good morning. We ready to begin? All right, we are ready to begin. Happy New Year.
Oh, same to you.
Although it doesn't look much different than the old year, does it? Well, I didn't stay up, but you look out the window 11:55 and you look out at 12:05 and it looks about the same. All right. Sacred gifts and holy gatherings. Apologize for the lesson title that ends with a preposition. You're probably not supposed to do that, but I didn't make it up. A bride worth waiting for. January, we start part 2. 4 weddings and a funeral. It's nothing like the movie. All right. Hugh Grant will not play a part in this lesson series. All right, so bride worth waiting for. So there will be 4 weddings here. And seeing a couple of them, we don't even know the name of the bride and groom. So that's different. And then death of a friend, of course, that's the dear friend Lazarus. All right. So since we're talking about weddings, can you think of a better verse to start with than this? Therefore a man shall leave his father and his mother and hold fast to his wife, and they shall become one flesh. The hardest thing that people had doing, leaving. They didn't want to leave. They stayed around. They stayed around. Of course, the oldest son, you wanted him to stay around. He's going to be doing the inheriting. And you like to have the kids around to help with the work. So even though this was God's will, they don't do it. So he shall leave his father and his mother and hold fast to his wife. How many wives? One? Just one. And what's happened? They shall become one flesh. That doesn't happen in today's lesson. Jacob plus Leah plus Rachel plus Zilpah plus Bilhah do not turn out to be one flesh.
That's a lot of flesh.
Yeah. Sort of like a cat, a sack of cats. And I love cats, you know. All right. Then Jacob went on his journey and came to the land of the people of the east. Gordon, last Sunday you talked about the people of the east, didn't you?
People out east.
Out east. Those
Beware of Easterners.
Magi, they came from the east to Jerusalem. Who was the most famous person from the east?
Oh, yeah.
Job. He was the greatest of all the people of the east. So Jacob is going there. But let's do a flashback. Why is he going there? All this will be very familiar, but we'll get a little more detail. These are the generations of Isaac, Abraham's son. Abraham fathered Isaac, and Isaac was 40 years old when he got married. 40 years old when he got married. That'll be a theme here. When he took Rebekah, the daughter of Bethuel, the Aramean of Padam Haram, the sister of Laban, the Aramean. We'll be heavily into Laban this lesson. And Isaac prayed to the Lord for his wife because she was barren, and the Lord granted his prayer, and Rebekah, his wife, conceived. Isaac prayed to the Lord, and the Lord granted his prayer. I wonder if Abraham and Sarah thought of that. Okay, the children struggled within her, and she said, if it is thus, why is this happening to me? So she went to inquire of the Lord. So why is this happening? This is her first child. She doesn't know why this is happening. She doesn't know she has twins. And the Lord said to her, 2 nations are in your womb, and 2 peoples from within you shall be divided. The one shall be stronger than the other. The older shall serve the younger. And Rebekah, this is going to happen. You don't need to do anything to make this happen. I got it. I'll take care of it. You don't need to do anything except give birth. When her days to give birth were completed, behold, there were twins in her womb. The first came out red, all of his body like a hairy cloak, so they called his name Esau, which means hairy. Afterward, his brother came out with his hand holding Esau's heel, so they named him Jacob. Isaac was 60 years old when he bore them. Married, 40, 60. So 20 years for this birth. When the boys grew up, Esau was a skillful hunter, a man of the field, and Jacob was a quiet man dwelling in tents. Isaac loved Esau because he ate of his game, but Rebekah loved Jacob because maybe she didn't like game. I don't know. Doesn't say why. Once, when Jacob was cooking stew, Esau came in from the field. He was out hunting, and he was exhausted, and Esau said to Jacob, "Let me eat some of the red stew, for I'm exhausted." Therefore his name was called Edom, which means red, and his descendants the Edomites. Jacob said, this isn't very brotherly, is it? Sell me your birthright. Now, Esau, even though he's only a few minutes older, was the older, so he got the birthright. We talked about birthright earlier last month. He says, I'm about to die. What use is my birthright? So swear to me. So he swore to him. He sold his birthright. Then Jacob gave Esau the food that he wanted, and then Esau despised his birthright.
When you sell your birthright, you don't exchange pieces of paper.
Nope.
Is it just word to word?
I suppose so. He didn't have any proof. And I did read from the ancient Near East treaties that you could do that. You were able to do that. When Esau was 40 years old, see a trend here? He married. He took Judith, the daughter of Beri the Hittite, to be his wife, and Basemath, the daughter of Elon the Hittite, and they made life bitter for Isaac and Rebekah. So he was 40 years old, same age as Isaac. They made life bitter. We're not told why, but if he would have left his father and his mother, like God said in Genesis 2, this wouldn't have happened. Now, the stolen blessing, this is long, so we'll just summarize. Isaac is old, and he's getting ready to bestow that birthright, that blessing. So he asks Esau, says, go out and hunt some game for me, and then I will eat that, and then I will bless you. I'll give you that birthright. So Esau, being a good son, does that, but Rebekah overhears this and comes up with a plan to have Jacob impersonate his brother Esau. Rebekah loves the Lord, so she's going to help him make this thing come true because she doesn't think the Lord can do this on his own. So she takes this into her hands. You know, if you've read Macbeth, sort of like Lady Macbeth here, if Macbeth is going to be the next king, well, they got to kill King Duncan. Isaac is suspicious. So when they do this, even Isaac, even though he's old, he can't see, he's suspicious because of the voice. But Jacob accomplishes this, and then he gets the blessing. Then Esau, he was successful, had a successful hunt. He prepares the food that he wants, and he goes in for his blessing. And then he finds out from his father. His father's shocked. Didn't I already do this? And then finds out he does not get a blessing. Rather, he gets a curse. So Esau says, is he not rightly named Jacob? For he has cheated me. Jacob, he's a cheat. Besides, a heel grabber. You could also say, well, he grabbed his heel. Well, that's cheating. Now, Esau hated Jacob. Esau hates his twin brother because of the blessing with which his father had blessed him. And Esau said to himself, the days of mourning for my father are approaching. So he thinks that his father's going to die fairly soon, and then he's going to kill his brother. Well, he doesn't know. Isaac still has 43 more years to live. Then I will kill him. But the words of Esau, her oldest son, were told to Rebekah. Rebekah's always, you can't hide anything from Rebekah. Mama always knows what's going on. So she sent and calls Jacob, the younger son, and says to him, behold, your brother Esau is comforting himself by knowing that he's going to kill you as soon as your father dies. Now therefore, obey my voice, arise and flee to Laban, or Lavan is the Hebrew, my brother in Haran, and stay with him a while. Literally in the Hebrew, that means stay with him a few days, until your brother's fury turns away. Or I think it's going to take more than a few days.
This is better than an episode of Dallas.
Yep. All the drama. Until your brother's anger turns away from you, and he forgets what you have done to him. She's totally innocent, isn't she? What you did. I didn't do it. Then I will send and bring you from there. Well, she never actually does that. Why shouldn't I be bereft of both of you in one day? Why should I? This is all about Rebekah, isn't it? So Rebekah convinces, so she needs to protect her younger son. So she convinces Isaac to send Jacob away. And she comes up with an excuse. Then Rebekah says to Isaac, I loathe my life because of these Hittite women. If Jacob marries one of the Hittite women like these, one of the women of the land, what good will my life be to me? Then Isaac called Jacob and blessed him and directed him, you must go and take a wife from you must not take a wife from the Canaanite women, which includes Hittites. Arise and go to Padan Aram, to the house of Bethuel, your mother's father, and take as a wife from there one of the daughters of Laban, your mother's brother. God Almighty bless you, and so, and be fruitful and multiply. And he certainly does that when he gets there.
So, is Rebekah doing God's will, or is God's will being done in spite of?
I think the second one, in spite of that. God's will was done in spite of what Sarah did with Hagar. Now, are the Hittite women that Esau's married any worse than Laban and his daughters? Laban's not honest. We see that here, Jacob complaining about him. He has to serve him for 20 years. 20 years I've been in your house. I served you 14 years for your 2 daughters because you deceived me. And 6 more years after I wanted to leave for your flock, and you have changed my wages 10 times, all to thinking you're benefiting yourself, but the Lord actually worked it in Jacob's favor. Laban is not a worshiper of the Lord. He has household idols. Rachel, Jacob's wife, when they leave, she steals the household idols. I don't know if it's to worship him or it's just because she's so mad at her father that she's going to steal him. Plus also, I think the household idols went to the firstborn son. So she's taking the gift of the firstborn son. So here's the trip. So basically, he's reversing the trip. Here's Ur of the Chaldees. He's reversing the trip that Abraham made, and then he's going up here. About 400 miles he's traveling, and his transportation mode is his 2 feet. He's having to sneak out undercover, because he's trying to get away from his older brother. So here's, I'll look at this one. So here we have Terah. So here's Jacob and Esau down here. And then, let's see. And then here we see that Jacob is the great-grandson of Terah. And these 2, Leah and Rachel, are the great-great-granddaughters. And we see all the women here. Sarah, Rebekah, Leah, and Rachel. The women in genetic line of Terah. They have a problem with fertility. Jacob and Rachel, some misperceptions. I read some of these in the lesson stuff. And I taught Jacob before several years ago, so I knew, well, that's not right. One of them was Laban had 2 daughters, Leah and Rachel. He had no sons. They weren't mentioned. But we go to Genesis 31:1. Now Jacob heard that the sons of Laban were saying, Jacob has taken all that was our father's, and from what was our father's he had gained his wealth. I think the reason here that they weren't mentioned, Leah, firstborn, Rachel, secondborn, and then the sons were younger. Laban was able to take advantage of Jacob because he was young and inexperienced. No, that's not true. Here's a table. This is what I had when I taught that class before. This comes from the ESV Study Bible, page 100. And then here's the passages. Some of these will say that, but most of them, we know this 130, 47 is when he died. 130, when Jacob comes to Egypt, he meets Pharaoh, and Pharaoh asks him, how old are you? He says 130. So here's, and then some of these you have to calculate. You go backwards. This 17 years was how old Joseph was when he was sold into slavery. And then the 20 years is the years that Jacob worked for Laban. And 7 years was the years he had to wait for to work before he could marry Rachel. So does 77 surprise you? We had 40, 40, and 77. This surprised me. Now we'll look at the names here. Jacob means he was one who cheats. Once he leaves, he wrestles with God overnight and he prevails. So in the morning, the angel is called, touches his hip and hinders him. But he says, enough, enough. And he changes his name to Israel, because you have striven with God. Well, people can strive with God, but he strove with God and he prevailed. Look at Leah, weary, tired, languid. And then Rachel, a ewe, a sheep. Appropriate, she's a shepherdess. But remember Leah there. And then God changes his name from one who cheats to one who overcomes. He gets a better name. So, let's go on the trip. Then Rachel went on his journey and came to the land of the people of the east. And as he looked, he saw a well in the field, and behold, the sheep. Does this well sound familiar? When Abram sends his servant to get Rebekah, where does he meet her? At the well. And Rebekah waters his camels. Where does Moses meet Zipporah? At a well. Well. That was the office water cooler of that time. Okay?
Jesus also met the woman in John 4 at the well.
Yes. Yeah. That's a good place to meet women, because they generally get the water. As he looked, he saw a well in the field, and behold, 3 flocks of sheep lying beside it. So all the shepherds, this well is a community well, and it served all the shepherds in the area. There's 3 flocks waiting to be watered. For out of that well the flocks were watered. The stone of the well's mouth was large, and when all the flocks were gathered there, the shepherds would roll the stone away the mouth, and that's where they would water. So there was a stone over it. Jacob knows about sheep, and he said to them, my brothers, where have you come from? He said, we are from Haran. He said, oh, that's the place I want to go. Do you know Laban, the son of Nahor? They said, we know him. And he said, is it well with him? Yes, it is well with him. And he said, Rachel, his daughter, is now coming with the sheep. He says, behold, he says, well, it's not time to water the sheep. It's still high day. You bring them in when it's cooler. So he says, water the sheep and then go so I can talk to her. But they said, we cannot until all the flocks are gathered together and the stone is rolled away. So Jacob takes matters into his own hands, and then he removes the stone. So We're told here that Rachel has her father's sheep, for she was a shepherdess. Again, indicating that the sons were too young to do this at this time. Now, as soon as Jacob saw Rachel, the daughter of Laban, his mother's brother, and the sheep of Laban, his mother's brother, if I said that right, Jacob came near and rolled the stone away from the well's mouth, and he watered the flock of Laban, his mother's brother. Then Jacob kissed Rachel, a gentle kiss, probably on the cheek, and he wept aloud. And Jacob told Rachel that he was her father's kinsman, and that he was Rebekah's son. So he's the son of Rebekah, her aunt. And she ran and told her father. And then as soon as Laban hears the news about Jacob, he runs to meet him, he embraces him, he kisses him, and he brings him to his house. Jacob told Laban all these things, all the things that had happened to him, that he was sent there by his sister to come and find a wife for himself. He probably doesn't mention that his brother wants to kill him because he cheated him. Not a good thing to say. And Laban said to him, surely you are my bone and my flesh. And he stays with him a month. Keep in mind, his mother says, do what you need to do, then come back home. Then Laban says to Jacob, because you are my kinsman, should you therefore serve me for nothing? Tell me what your wages should be. So he wants to get this all settled and get this all taken care of, because he knows the name Jacob means he's a cheater. Now Laban had 2 daughters. The name of the older was Leah, and the name of the younger was Rachel, and she's the one he met at the well. Leah's eyes were weak, but Rachel was beautiful in form and appearance. Jacob loved Rachel, and if you read it in the Septuagint, agapeo. He agapes Rachel. And he said, I will serve you 7 years for your younger daughter Rachel. So, here's the negotiations. So Laban says, it's not right that you work for me for nothing. Tell me what your wages would be. Well, I want my wages to be your younger daughter. And I'll serve you 7 years. So he sets the terms. He sets the terms here. Now what about Leah's eyes were weak? Did she need glasses? But Rachel was beautiful in form and appearance. It doesn't seem to go together. How about Leah's eyes were weak, but Rachel's eyes sparkled like the stars? You know, you're comparing Leah's eyes with Rachel's figure. Doesn't seem to go together. But look here, for Joseph, Joseph is Rachel's son. Rachel was beautiful in form and appearance. Joseph was handsome in form and appearance.
Power couple.
Exactly the same words in Hebrew, but for Rachel, they changed the word to beautiful. For Joseph, the translators changed it to handsome. So we got the contrast between the two. Leah is the older, Rachel is the younger. He likes the younger one, and he wants the younger one. So he offers 7 years. Okay. Rock, soft eyes. The word there, rock, is found, 16 times in the New Testament. We have weak here, which is how the ESV translated, but it can also be her eyes were soft, her eyes were tender, her eyes were gentle. There's other words that it can use. Now, this is from the UBS Handbook on Genesis. The UBS Handbook is a handbook that Bible translators use. It tells, what's the best way to translate a word, or is this an idiom? Is it a figure of speech? So this is what Bible translators use. So weak translates the Hebrew for tender, delicate, dainty. And according to the Anchor Yale Bible, the popular explanation for why Leah's eyes were weak is because that's what her name means. Her name means, weak or dainty, so therefore her eyes were weak. But then it says, probably the best solution for what to translate it is to put lovely there and then put a footnote there. So this is the NRSV, which I think is very good. New Revised Standard Version. Now Laban had 2 daughters. The name of the elder was Leah, and the name of the younger was Rachel. Leah's eyes were lovely, and Rachel was graceful and beautiful. Jacob loved Rachel, so he said, I will serve you 7 years for your younger daughter Rachel. And I think this makes better sense. You're complimenting Rachel, or you're complimenting Leah, but you're also saying that Rachel was more beautiful. So that both of them had, redeeming factors. So Jacob loved Rachel. How did Rachel feel about a man that was old enough to be her grandfather? We're not told anywhere that Rachel had any dear feelings for Jacob. Then it has lovely, meaning of the Hebrew is uncertain. So Laban said, it is better that I give her to you than I should give her to any other man. Stay with me. What do you think of his response? Imagine you've got something like say you've got a 2006 Chevy Impala. He says, I'll give you $100,000 for it. Well, I don't know, maybe I'll take it. I'll do you a favor. But what happened here? Okay, went up. Okay, so this is really a large amount of money, but Laban is playing it cool here and say, well, okay, I guess I'll give her to you. Better to give her to you than to give them somebody else. You're a kinsman, so I'll give it to you. So Jacob served 7 years for Rachel, and they seemed to him but a few days because of the love he had for her. They seemed to him but a few days. Let's go back here. Rebekah to Jacob. Stay with him a few days. Well, I did, just 7 years, a few days. So those seemed like a few days, these 7 years. After he gets her, the next 7 years will seem like an eternity. The bride price. This is from Lexham Research Commentary. When a man married in the ancient Near East, that include where they were in Padam Paran and also in Canaan, he paid a bride price or a marriage present to his father-in-law to compensate for the loss of the daughter's contribution. After all, Rachel was a shepherdess. So he's paying her, Laban, for the loss of her work as a shepherd. The bride price was a fixed amount determined by the woman's father. But in this case, Jacob set the price, and it was very high. But another type of gift included ceremonial marriage gifts to the bride's family. This is what Abraham paid for Rebekah. Later Israelite law fixed the maximum bride price at 50 shekels of silver. That's equivalent, today's term, think of 20 silver dollars. And the good silver dollars when they actually were silver. Later Israelite law fixed the maximum bride price at 50 shekels, but most prices were much lower. If you couldn't afford it, they wanted to get their daughter married. Because Jacob had no family or money to pay the price, Jacob paid for it with his labor. Quite a bit of labor. Let's look at Rebekah's bride price. Abraham was in his advanced age, and he did not want, like Rebekah, he did not want his son Isaac to marry one of the women of the land, one of the Canaanite women. So he sends his servant to Padam Haran, to get a wife for his son Isaac. The servant goes and he takes 10 of Abraham's camels loaded with gold and silver and jewelry and all sorts of choice gifts. Maybe some frankincense and myrrh.
Oh, definitely.
Right? So he goes to Nahor in Mesopotamia, and there he meets Rebekah by a spring of water, and he prays to the Lord. This is a hard journey, difficult. He says, Lord, please let the woman that you choose meet us there and let her offer to water my camels. And that happens, and it's Rebekah. So he gives Rebekah, he gives Rebekah her mother. So he gives Rebekah. So the servant gives Rebekah and her mother and Laban gold and silver and garments and gold and frankincense and myrrh and everything there. So all this goes to the east, and then later the Magi bring it back. Right? So the 7 years fly by. Maybe he needed to come down for a landing around 6 years and see if he can get Leah hitched, right? Then Jacob said to Laban, give me my wife. They were betrothed. So she's like his wife. Give me my wife that I may go into her, for my time is completed. And then Laban doesn't say anything. So he just gets this feast together and make a feast. And those lasted like 7 days. But in the evening, under cover of darkness, he takes his daughter Leah and he brings her to the tent, to Jacob. And then he goes into her. So, and then we got a parenthetical, which is essentially that Laban gives his daughter Leah a servant. You know, every young bride, wedding gift, what'd you like? Oh, get me a servant, please. When you like that, get me somebody to clean the house for me. And Jacob said to Laban, what is this that you have done to me? So and Jacob said to Leah, why are you here? And is he hidden in his head? Said, how do I not know that this wasn't Rachel? You're allowed to talk to her when she's in the tent.
You should have checked her eyes.
Yeah, check that out. I mean, even Isaac, as old as he was suspicious of Esau and nothing. So it's kind of his own fault, isn't it? Why then have you deceived me? Well, those 7 years shouldn't have flown by, should they? Around 6 years, Rachel needs to go have a talk with her dad and says, Dad, we need to find a husband for Leah. Is 7 years long enough? Leah was pretty. Maybe people didn't want Laban for a father-in-law. So, were Jacob and Leah now husband and wife? Was it legal? What's required for a marriage in A&E, ancient Near East? So were Jacob and Rachel standing together holding hands? Do you, Jacob, son of Isaac, take Rachel, daughter of Laban, to be your lawfully wedded wife, to have and to hold? Do you, Rachel? There was none of that. You had a feast. So let's look at this wedding here. Rebekah, when she comes back. So what do you need? Is there a marriage certificate? So Rebekah lifted up her eyes, and when she saw Isaac, she dismounted from the camel and said to the servant, well, who's that man walking in the field to meet us? And the servant said, that's your future husband, lady. So, it's my master, your future husband. So she took her veil and covered herself. So that long 400 miles with the servant there, she wasn't wearing her veil. But now she is. This is her future husband. And the servant told Isaac all the things that he had done, how he met Rebekah, how he prayed to the Lord, and how she, watered the camels. Then Isaac went into her tent, brought her into the tent of Sarah his mother, and took Rebekah, and she became his wife, and he loved her. So the thing you need for a wedding, you need a tent. So any woman that went into that tent with Jacob would have been his wife the next day. All that other stuff didn't matter.
It strongly suggests consummation.
Consummation, yeah. So that's what happened. But was this God's will that Jacob be deceived? Do not be deceived. God is not mocked. For whatever one sows, that will he also reap. Laban said, it is not so done in our country to give the younger before the firstborn.
There's the rub.
And oh, by the way, Jacob, that's also in your country. You should have known better. Yeah, you should have known better. So why didn't they do that? Did God cloud their eyes? You know, that they forgot. Oh no, we forgot to get Leah married. Complete the week of this one. In other words, complete the wedding feast. So they got married. So this happened on the first day of the wedding feast. The wedding feast is 1 week. So complete the week of this one, and we will give you the other also. Isn't he a loving father? He doesn't even know his daughter's names. Complete the week of Leah, and then you can marry Rachel. In return for serving me another 7 years. Now wait a minute, Laban. There's no. I served you 7 years for Rachel. And if you want to throw in Leah, fine. I'm not working another 7 years. Jacob did so and completed her week. I don't know about you, but I would not want Jacob to do contract negotiations for me. He'd sell the farm. So he works for another week. And this week does not go by like that. 7 years, another 7 years. During these 7 years, Jacob will have 12 children. 12 children in 7 years. And he finds out that Rachel wears the pants in the family. He does what she says. Then Laban gave him his daughter Rachel to be his wife. Laban also gave her a female servant, Bilhah. So Rachel, about 16. 16, about 23 here, and her husband's about 84. So he gives her Bilhah to his daughter. Bilhah, and this is kind of sad, 10 to 12 years old. Young woman. Must be good looking because later Reuben sleeps with her and loses his birthright because of that. Reuben hasn't even been born yet, but she must have been a good-looking woman. And I also read somehow after Rachel dies, Bilhah takes her place then as a primary wife, overtaking even Leah then.
And all of these children, their names tell a story.
Yes, and it's sad. So Jacob went into Rachel also, and he loved Rachel more than Leah. Well, that makes sense, doesn't it? Esau hated Jacob and wanted to kill him. Leah deceived Jacob. At least he didn't want to kill her. Deceiver Jacob had asked for the younger Rachel's hand, but was deceived by Laban and tricked into marrying Leah. Thus the ancient Near East tradition of the older daughter marrying before the younger was preserved. This custom is still adhered to in many countries. And when a young daughter has an opportunity to marry, everything is done to get the older daughter married first. But hey, they only had 7 years, for they were pressed for time, weren't they? Even in countries where this custom is not observed, there's still somewhat a social stigmatism attached to a woman whose younger daughters marries, whose younger sisters all marry before she does. Sort of like Pride and Prejudice, where the younger daughter gets married first.
It's like the stigma of being called a spinster.
Yep, so okay. And this works, it's so bad that when the commandments are issued in Leviticus, it says, while your wife is living, do not marry your sister and have sexual relations with her, for they would be rivals. And we certainly had an example. So this is over 400 years later that this law comes out. When Rachel saw that she bore children, Jacob no children, she envied her sister. Rachel's servant Bilhah conceived again. Then Rachel said, with mighty wrestlings I have wrestled with my sister and have prevailed. Well, no, you really haven't. But think of this, with mighty wrestlings I have wrestled with my sister and have prevailed. Think of this with Jacob. With mighty wrestlings I have wrestled with God and have prevailed. So he changed his name. So Jacob, Leah, and Rachel. This is sad. One of the saddest parts in Scripture, I think. When the Lord saw that Rachel was not loved, he opened her womb. These words are only found 2 times in Scripture. He does it here with Leah, and then later he'll do it with Rachel. So does this mean that Leah was also barren until this time? Leah became pregnant and gave birth to a son. She named him Reuben, for she said, it is because the Lord has seen my misery. Surely my husband will love me now. Can you see the despair? She conceived again, and when she gave birth to a son, she said, because the Lord heard that I am not loved, he gave me this one. So she named him Simeon. Again she conceived, and when she gave birth to the son, she said, now at last my husband will become attached to me, because I've borne him 3 sons. 3 for me, Rachel, 0. So he was named Levi. She conceived again, and when she gave birth to a son, she said, this time I will praise the Lord. So she named him Judah, and she stopped having children. So what'd she say on that 4th time? Has she given up on her husband? Said, forget about it. Forget about Jacob. I'll just praise the Lord. Then she stopped having children. When Rachel saw that she was not bearing Jacob any children, so this had to really irritate her. Really irritate. They both got married within a week of each other, and Leah, 4 children in a row, over about 4 years. She became jealous of her sister, so she said to Jacob, give me children or I'll die. Jacob becomes angry with her and says, am I in the place of God who has kept you from having children? Then she said, here is Bilhah, my maidservant. Sleep with her so that she can bear children for me, and that I through her can build a family. Does she not know about Sarah and Hagar? What did that do for the relationship between Sarah and Hagar?
Oil and water.
Yeah. And here's something kind of interesting. Give me children or I'll die. This is the first recorded conversation between Jacob and Rachel. In there. And there's no recorded conversations between Leah and Jacob. So, first thing she says, give me children or I'll die. So that I can bear children for me, and that through her I can build a family. Well, this thing of taking a wife, taking another wife if you can't have children, that's not to bear the children for the woman. It's patriarchal. It's to continue the line. Jacob has 4 sons. He's got the heir and the spare, and the spare and the spare. So he's good. You don't need to do this. You can't legally justify this anymore, except that she wants children. Then God remembered Rachel. He listened to her, and he opened her womb. She became pregnant, gave birth to a son. God has taken away my disgrace. Okay, now you have prevailed. You've done it on your own. You haven't taken your servant. So she named him Joseph, and she said, may the Lord add to me another son. Rachel, be careful what you ask for. Because we know what happens on the next son.
You can just hear her when she shouts his name. Add to me another. Get in here.
Yeah. Get me another one. So, always ring the bell. So, does he treat him as a slave? So when they're leaving, he says, I served you 14 years for your 2 daughters, 6 years for your flock, and have changed my wages 10 times. If the God of my father, the God of Abraham, had not been on my side, surely now you would have sent me away empty-handed, like a slave. Then Laban answered and said to Jacob, the daughters are my daughters, the children are my children, the flocks are my flocks. All that you see is mine. Jacob, if you want to leave, you can leave. You're leaving these with me. Rachel and Leah, they're also disgusted with their father. He said, he's treated us like foreigners, he's sold us, he's devoured our money, all our wealth, so they're happy to leave. So here's the children. And we probably need to leave. Leah, Reuben, Simeon, Levi, Judah. Then she doesn't have any more. So Rachel gets into, here, take Bilhah. She has Dan and Naphtali. And then Leah says, well, you take my servants, and then you have Gad and Asher. And then Leah picks up again with Issachar, Zebulun, and Dinah. And then finally, Rachel has Joseph. 14 years. What about Leah? Leah became Jacob's wife, not by his or her choice, but by her father's scheming. He justified his actions by the custom of marrying the older instead of the younger. Leah is never noted for any heroic acts and is only rarely attributed with outstanding virtues, but she is clearly a strong woman. She persevered through the marriage, sharing her husband with her favored younger sister and 2 concubines. Leah's story illustrates that God often chooses to fulfill his purposes using a person overlooked. Despite living in the shadow, Leah's life, her sons would become, Levites and Judah. And then this last thing here. Although Jacob loved Rachel more than Leah, he gave Leah the greatest honor by burying her near him in the cave of Machpelah. So, next week, the most beautiful bride. Song of Solomon. She's even more beautiful than Rachel. You're welcome.
We did.